This morning we're going to spend a little bit of time in this book called Welcome to the Wilderness. The title of this book, this is a sweet book. I remember reading it long after I wrote it and began to cry. I couldn't believe I wrote it. It's a good book. And the very first thing the Lord ever spoke to me as a young disciple through a prophet was that I was called to the ministry, and God was going to open the doors for me. I didn't have to do anything to make any doors open. But he said, you'll think you're ready, but you're not going to be ready. And when you think you're not ready, that's when I'll start using you. But he said, you're going to spend a lot of time in the wilderness. And I knew when he said that, it wasn't a bad thing. And the wilderness wasn't a geographic place, it was a spiritual place. And so for a long time, over the next 6 years before I became a pastor, but even after that, I spent time in the wilderness. I got to recognize the wilderness and recognize the conditions. If you look up the wilderness in a concordance, like a Hebrew or Greek word, it'll talk about a desolate place, a lonely place, a place of being humbled, where familiar grace that you're used to is lifted. You don't have grace like you used to. A time of temptation. Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. And if you come out of it properly, you'll come out with more power, more humility, more grace than you went in. So it's a place normally where there's a lot of subtraction. God takes things out, but he adds things that you can't get any other way. Almost everybody in the Bible had their ministry or their message formed in the wilderness. So it starts with Abraham, then Moses spent 80 years in the wilderness, 40 years by himself looking after unruly sheep in the wilderness. And then when he was finished that process and God was getting Egypt out of him, and he was adding to him his power, his authority, grace, and an encounter with God that he never had before. And then he spent 40 more years of wilderness leading unruly sheep across the wilderness called the children of Israel. God took the children of Israel through the wilderness. They had a slum mentality. I've been in many of the great slums in the world, including in Chile. I've been in 2 or 3 really difficult slums in Chile. And there's a slum mentality. You don't expect to live there very long. There's no streets, no sewers, no infrastructure like electricity and things like that, because it's not a normal city. It's something that happened to people. People landed there. We were in some really rough places. And the government was trying to build houses for them. We saw some of those 8x8 houses. But nobody plans to live in the wilderness, or a slum. Even in Haiti, Africa has one of the worst slums in the world. Nobody plans to stay there, so there's nothing permanent. Everything is kind of thrown together, thinking we're going to move on. And for whatever reason, that doesn't happen. And so the children of Israel were living in Egypt. They didn't plan to stay. They had a word from the Lord that they were going to go to a promised land. But if you think about 400 years, that's unbelievable. You know, America's half that age. And to spend all that time in the wilderness, and all you do is work, fall in bed, get up, do it all over again, no retirement, no vacations, and nothing to show for your work. You work for other people. when it comes to building your house, you just grab whatever you can put together and build it temporarily, or attach it to someone else's house, because you don't plan on staying there. So the children of Israel went through the wilderness to get the slum mentality out of them. They had no religion. They didn't know God. And so he gave them religion. He gave them a law. He gave them a knowledge of him. So he took things out and he added things. And that's what's difficult about the wilderness, is he takes things out. He takes out our relationship to money, our relationship to people, our relationship to sex, our relationship to popularity. My brother-in-law was very well known in our city for playing the guitar. When he met the Lord asked him to set that aside. He went through a wilderness where he never played the guitar. And when everything changed in his motives for playing the guitar and his identity with the guitar changed, he was able to pick it up again and help lead worship, but it was a totally different experience. I had the same thing with my art. I was a cartoonist. My identity was so mixed up in that whole thing, and the idea of fame, and me seeing it was my ability rather than a gift. So many things needed to be taken away. The best way for God to deal with us is to take it away. And it's not easy because our identity is wrapped up in it. Mm-hmm. Our relationship to money, he took us through a thing where we had nothing. And he used nothing to produce something in us, so that when we come out of the wilderness, he could trust us with money. And it didn't mean anything to us because we'd been through the wilderness. Actually, we got so used to the wilderness that when he started to add to our life things like money, we preferred the wilderness. It was easier. We understood that. We weren't afraid of that. We were afraid to have money. We didn't know whether we'd make it, whether we could do that test. So loneliness, people think loneliness is bad. Loneliness is something God does. It's not the enemy. It's not evil. Loneliness, everybody experiences. Even if you're surrounded by people who love you, he will make sure that you go through a time of loneliness. And the loneliness should draw us to the Lord, should cause us to realize he's all we need. And there are people who hate loneliness. They treat it like a disease. Mm-hmm. They try to fill their life with social media and different things to cure the loneliness. But loneliness is a powerful tool that God can use. And it doesn't matter whether you're married. It doesn't matter how many people love you. I've been a pastor of a church surrounded by people who love me and go through a time of loneliness that I couldn't explain to people, where your heart aches. And I realized that it was God. It was him using that to take things out and draw me to himself, add things to me. So everybody in the Bible who is anybody. So we got Abraham, Moses, David. David spent a lot of time in the wilderness, even though he was called to be a king. John the Baptist, Elijah, we'll talk maybe a bit about him this morning. A lot of time, he prophesies his first word, and the first thing that happens is he goes into the wilderness for three and a half years. He just began to preach, first sermon, first prophetic word, and he goes through the wilderness. And David, of course, John the Baptist was made in the wilderness. Our messages, most of our messages come through dry, lonely, desert times. Jesus spent a lot of time in the wilderness, and then he led his disciples into the wilderness. Paul becomes born again, and he begins to preach, and saw immediate results. And then the Lord said, great, now I'm going to take you into the wilderness. I think he lets us have some success, see the power of our testimony, but then it gives us the incentive to go through the wilderness. We know that if we stay through the subtraction, he'll add things to our life and he'll use us. And I used to think, before I got really familiar with the wilderness, I used to think that Christianity was one big oasis. Do you know this word, oasis? With a few wilderness places. But now I think it's all one big wilderness with a few oases. I think that's closer to the truth. I'm not afraid of the wilderness. It's been nothing but good for me. Some people think that they have burnout or depression or the blues, but there's a spiritual element called the wilderness that they don't factor into it. It's a spiritual experience. And so I write about it in this book to show how normal it is, how it's part of God's plan. You cannot develop a ministry or a message without the wilderness. So we need to embrace it. We can't be afraid of it. We can't reject it. So I call this Welcome to the Wilderness. That came out of a time in my life. I was a pastor. My family loved me, my kids, church. But I went through something that I couldn't explain. I thought I was backsliding. I thought it felt like God was a million miles away. It felt like I lost his presence. I lost his voice, his nearness. I could minister because I have a gift. The gift was working. The gift always works. That's the part that's a little unusual, is the gift. The gift will work, but you feel detached from the vine. You feel like God's a long ways away, and you still do what you need to do. You go through the motions, but you know it's not normal. And I did that. And then I began to pray and say, God, where are you? What's wrong with me? Are you punishing me? Have I done something wrong? And I went through some condemnation. And I began to cry out, say, Lord, help me, lead me, show me what's happening, what's wrong with me. And felt like it was silence. I became more desperate. And finally I came to a place where I said, I have to find out what's going on. It's not something you could even really tell other people about. It's hard to explain. But I had a friend up in Canada who owned a cottage on a lake. And the only way to get there is by boat. In the summertime, there's no roads, no electricity, no telephone. And in the wintertime, you drive across the lake, across the ice. There's roads. They actually plow snow so you could drive your truck. And I called him and I said, can I use your cabin for a week? He said, absolutely, I'll take you there. And he drove me across the lake. Sometimes you can feel the water moving under the ice. So he took me. I had a few cans of beans and a few cans of vegetables, but I didn't plan on eating very much. I was desperate. I wanted to connect with God. And he dropped me off, and I saw the taillights of the truck going across the lake in the darkness. And I almost said, no, don't go, stay. Take me back. It hit me how lonely, how isolated I was. I was away from everything. There was no houses around me, just wolves and just by myself, and my head was saying, this is crazy. I had a little fire in the stove, some extra blankets. It was super cold outside. And I got around the fireplace and I opened my Bible and I began to worship the Lord. And Jesus came to the cabin. and he spoke to me. I didn't see him, and I didn't hear him with my natural ears, but he was right there. And he spoke to me, and he said, "Welcome to the wilderness." And I began to cry because I realized, oh, that's what I've been going through. I'm not afraid of the wilderness. I'd been a long time in the wilderness, many times in the wilderness. Is that all that this is? It's just wilderness? And he began to speak to me that night, and he never stopped talking for the next week. I wrote many things that he was teaching me, and it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I forgot about the truck. I forgot about the food. I forgot about the wolves. I forgot about the cold. All I wanted was to hear from Jesus, what he wanted to tell me. And he never takes you through the wilderness without giving you something. Jesus came out with more power. John the Baptist tapped into power by living a fasted life in the wilderness. Paul came away with revelation that nobody else on the planet had. Moses came away with a knowledge of God that nobody else had. The children of Israel came away with a new religion and a new understanding of God. And the thing about the children of Israel that's amazing is they had this slum mentality where you just work, fall in bed, sweaty, hot, get up and do it again. No order, no real life. You're just trying to do what you have to do to survive. So he leads them out of Egypt and takes them on this journey through the wilderness. And one of the first places they came to is a place of bitterness. And that happens too. God will make sure that you taste bitterness so that you really appreciate what he provides when he provides water. But so many Christians, as soon as they get saved, they're disappointed with other Christians. They're disappointed with how people treat them. That's part of the process of being in the wilderness. The children of Israel experienced that. Then God took them out and began to subtract this mentality and add a whole new mentality. He introduced the law. He introduced order. We find out that he's a God who wants things done in a special way, a particular way. He would tell them, this is how you must live. He'd say things like, from now on, don't just throw your garbage on the streets or anywhere you want to. If you do this, I will not walk among you. And when you go to the bathroom, you bury it. You don't go just outside your tent and go to the bathroom, which many, many tribes do that. And there's disease, and it's discouraging, it's awful. And he said other tribes could do that, other nations, but you will be different. And the word different is the word holy. He said, you're going to be different than any people. So he took them out and he showed them how to have relationship. He showed them how to, if you borrow something, you must give it back in good shape. If it's not, you have to pay for it 7 times. And if you steal something, there's punishment. If you hurt somebody, someone can hurt you. I mean, he come up with a rule for everything. And they had no rules in Egypt. The rule was survival. And now God's narrowing their life and saying, you will be disciplined. And he'd say, now, you just don't put your tent anywhere you want to. You put your tent with your tribe, and you have certain color banners and certain color flags, and then this tribe will be next to you, and this tribe, and in the middle will be the tabernacle. And you must have so many, everything must be lined up perfectly. And he put order. It's funny, when people join the army, they usually do it to get away from the discipline of their parents. They join the army, and the first thing they find out is they're given discipline, but then they become something. And they're grateful for that. Someone made them a disciplined person. I think it was our greatest football coach who won so many championships. He said, a good coach will make you do what you don't want to do so you can become what you've always wanted to become. And there's something about discipline that changes how you see yourself, how you think. And so God took the children of Israel through this desert experience. Now, if you go with me to Numbers chapter 24, it's an amazing story of the children of Israel. They've spent 40 years in the wilderness. They've come to the Jordan River. They're about to cross into the promised land. They're migrating. There's never been a migration like this in the history of the world, of millions of people leaving one place and going to another place. And so they would go through other nations, and other nations would have wars with them, or say, you're like locusts. You can't eat our crops. You can't drink our water. Moses would say, we'll pay for your water. We'll pay for anything we eat. But they wouldn't let them go through. Well, there's one king, just before they crossed over into the promised land, a king who hated them. There's always been anti-Semitism, prejudice, always in the heart of man. And there was no reason for this, but the king said, I hate these people. I want them cursed. He hired a prophet named Balaam and said, I will give you money, I'll give you riches, but you must curse this people. So they went up on this mountain where they could look out over the children of Israel. And in verses, chapter 24, in verses 5 to 7, listen to this. He says, how lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. Like valleys that stretch out, like gardens by the riverside, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. What they saw, what Balaam saw, was the children of Israel looked like a garden. They looked like, I think they looked like an Amish garden. There's nothing more beautiful than an Amish garden. It's just perfect. Perfect rows and flowers growing around the outside. Everything's perfectly laid out. And the children of Israel had come from a slum mentality where everything's helter-skelter and strewn and cobbled together, ramshackled shacks. And now, when they looked out, they looked like a garden planted by the Lord, because God had brought order to their lives. And that's what the wilderness does. He will bring order to your life. It's not easy. You'll go through withdrawal of things that you normally are just able to do, and go where you want to go, do what you want to do. And he says, no, I'm shaping you, I'm molding you, I'm preparing you for ministry, I'm giving you a message, but with that comes order. And that's exactly what happened with the children of Israel. Can he do that to your life without you getting angry? Yeah. Can he do that to your life without quitting the process? Without saying, if this is what it is to be a disciple, I don't want anything to do with that. I quit. Many people do. Discipleship's not for everybody. It will bring order to your life. And he'll use the wilderness. That's his crucible. That's where you look at any man of God in the Bible or a woman of God, they were made in the wilderness. Their message was formed in the wilderness. It's part of the process. Amen?